Hey Darren, how are you?
Great. And yourself there, John.
Excellent.
Such a pleasure to connect. You're one of those artists familiar with the music for 20 plus years. Does it really feel like 20-ish years of success, or is it just the people like me reminding you of that?
Depends what day you ask. Yes, some days it does. Other days it feels like, I'm just hearing Superman on the radio for the first time. I'm really blessed that, as you mentioned, 20 years later, still doing it. And, I was one of those guys that it took a while. I was, a 15-year overnight success story. So
Right.
I've been doing it for a while. So yeah, I'm blessed. On the road now with the rock band for the first time, back in the bus for 10 years. So really kind of going back to the future. And I'm grateful for every day.
We're going to come back to that 15-year overnight success story in a little bit, but getting the housekeeping out of the way in a good way. Can one man save the world? Excellent reaction that track got. Was that a personal thing you just wrote for yourself, and then somebody went, "Hey, you really should put that out"?
It was interesting. I wrote a song almost a year ago now about the Afghanistan withdrawal, and called "Blood on My Hands." Again, song I wish I never had to write, and kind of just put it out without any expectation. And that song kind of became a significant song, especially for Afghan veterans.
Mm-hmm.
So it was similar with this one. After Putin invaded, I think many of us were inspired by Zelensky. He turned down our plane ticket, asked for, stingers, knowing that likely him and his family would be killed in days. So it was another song that kind of just, no intention of writing, it just kind of burst. This one was a little different. I scrambled because remember early in the war, he was being hunted by, assassins.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know if this guy was going to survive 24 hours. So I literally wrote it, recorded it. That's why it's piano vocal, the initial version, and put it out within 48 hours just to have something out there. And then I had, 2 months later, I'm in Ukraine filming a video with Ukrainian orchestra. That was beyond surreal. Never could have imagined that. But yeah, it was a song that I think needed to be written. And I think there frankly should have been more songs, and still should be more songs about this significant event. So both songs were kind of just bursts with no plan, no expectation. And I guess maybe that's why, they're the first couple songs I've written in, 2 or 3 years that weren't involved with, some kind of television project or something.
That's actually something I want to go towards, that you are a professional songwriter. And I say that because a lot of people who've had platinum records, if you say, how many songs have you written? They would go, well, there's 12 on the first album and 12 on the second album, so 24. And in your case, having hundreds of placements, knowing your history where your significant other may or may not have worked for your publisher, you've had these hundreds of sync placements. Did you know outright about publishing and the strength of writing as opposed to just writing for albums?
Not really. And very few songs that I've written have I written tailored for an actual film or television project. Most of them kind of found their way into the shows. Smallville, Superman was written years before Smallville. A lot of people think I wrote it for that song. Same with Chances for the Blind Side. People thought I wrote Chances for the Blind Side. I did write this song All for One for the Hawaii Five-0 100th episode. And it's actually fun to do that because it's almost like a homework assignment. You don't have expectations of having a hit. You're just like, here's something cool, let's write it, you do it. But when I first came up, and you're younger than me, but you remember, back in the day, sync was not a huge part of record company income.
Right.
It was record sales. And then of course, after streaming and the record sales collapsed, then sync became a huge part of record company survival. So I kind of went from this guy who, sold a few records, it was nice to have on the label, but, not a huge earner, to one of the top sync guys, which was important to them. So yeah, it's been really cool to see. And I really do enjoy that side of it. I enjoy writing to film, to script. It's, as I said, it's different than making a record. And also you have your inspiration in front of you. You have the content. So you're not starting with a blank slate. So it's a different mindset than songwriting, like the songs we just talked about. And so it's fun to do both.
Yeah. What you're talking about, you're speaking my language. As somebody who comes from an artist management background, one of the bands that I worked with on the team of was the band OK Go. And
Yeah.
the average snarky person would go, oh, so their last hit was a while ago. And then you go, nope. The commercial campaigns keep going and coming. The scoring for TV and film projects, you may not realize, or then that happens. So in your case, when did you start to realize that, okay, well, maybe my last top 40 hit was a couple of years ago, but I'm going to be okay?
Yeah, it's hard. It's, I have a lot of friends who had commercial success in the 2000s, and you kind of get used to having a song and you don't know if it's going to be a hit, but you're in the game, right?
Yeah.
And I had a song called What If, that was kind of my last swing at radio, and it got some airplay. But I was, grinding on the road, doing all the dog and pony shows, visiting like tertiary markets in Texas to get 3 spins.
Yeah.
And I was driving myself, there ain't no entourage no more, there's no handlers. And I remember I was driving through Texas in the middle of nowhere, and 100 Years came on the radio. And it kind of hit me then. I'm like, okay, you know what? Those days are gone. I'm incredibly blessed. Maybe I shed a tear or two, but sometimes you have to understand that, when the game changes, you have to change the field of play. And a lot of artists that have had success, it's very hard to do. You have to adjust your expectations.
Sure.
And so that's when I started doing other things. I started doing keynotes. I started doing symphony shows.
I was going to ask about that, the public speaking success that you've had.
Yeah, you try to do things that fulfill you artistically, but you also try to create your own content. I sold a couple TV shows. You just try to find platforms where you can write songs that people hear. And the funny, crazy thing about Blood on My Hands, and now this Zelensky song, Blood on My Hands got 0 spins on the radio, millions of impressions, millions of views, especially for our veterans. To me, that is as satisfying as having a hit song. Similar with this new Ukraine video with the Ukrainian orchestra. I just got, literally this morning, I got an email from somebody working in Ukraine. One of the mayors saw the video and was so moved, they're sending it out to the front to try to give a shot in the arm to the Ukrainian soldiers, right? Yeah. So this song has virtually no radio presence, but it's making a difference. And so as you kind of evolve into the next phase, you try to find ways to do that and understand that you're not going to have a top 10 hit. Even if I write, 100 Years plus Superman squared, it's just not going to happen. Springsteen wrote a song, he was so mad. U2 threw a tantrum. It happens to all of us. So, but it's hard to do. And it took me like a year or two to get over the depression and say, all right, how do I reinvent myself and keep going?
Right. I admire the work ethic, being there along with the talent, along with the wonderful attitude and the knowledge of reinventing yourself. But we talked about before the 15-year overnight success pattern. And no one would think that guy crossed paths with Rudy Sarzo. And I'm going to say that Rudy comes up in like 1 in 12 interviews that I do, because he, Quiet Riot, Whitesnake, Blue Oyster Cult, Dio, Rainbow, like Blue, Rudy's always there. So you crossed paths with Rudy in your early days. That was late 80s, like 88, 89?
Maybe he's the Kevin Bacon of rock. Yeah.
I thought about that.
It was surreal. I was actually staying in Malibu. I'd just gotten out of college, and I'd met these 2 guys at this pool. One was Rudy Sarzo. This other guy was Scott Sheets. Now, Scott Sheets was Pat Benatar's, one of the guitar players. Of course, not Neil, but he wrote Fire and Ice. So he was trying to put together a band and survive like everyone else. He was in his 40s. I was in my 20s. So I joined this band with basically a bunch of ex-Pat Benatar members, very young. And we were doing kind of like, pop rock, Bon Jovi rock, and having some success. Had a kind of big manager, record deal on the horizon. And then, Nirvana came out and everything went upside down. But Rudy became a really good friend and mentor. It was funny that you mentioned that because I was just actually watching your interview with David Coverdale.
Oh, geez, I'm sorry about that.
No, it was great. I mean, I had the Almost Famous experience.
Yeah.
Rudy really kind of saw that I had something, and he would advise me not just on music but on the business.
Yeah.
You know, he was a closet Barry Manilow fan. I'm sorry if I embarrass him, but he likes songs. And
Yes.
I would go with him when Whitesnake was Whitesnake. Here I go again, Whitesnake, Is This Love? And I would be the little kid riding up the elevator with Coverdale and Rudy after licking his guitar for 20,000 people. And
Even Coverdale
say,
made a
yeah,
joke to that, the licking the bass thing.
Yeah, and they would say, all right, John, you can come in this room, but you can't go in that room.
Right.
You know, they took care of me. And but all through my career, he was somebody who was so humble, so nice.
Yeah.
I saw his work ethic. And I think when I had success, I don't think, besides my parents, I don't think anybody was more excited for me than Rudy Sarzo, one of the greatest, nicest guys in rock and roll.
Well, if you were around Rudy in 88, 89, does that mean you were also around Bob Marlette and John Five?
No, I wasn't. I was around his brother a little bit. You know, his brother was doing the hurricane thing. Was it hurricane back in the day?
Yeah.
So I was kind of following that. There was a drummer named John Shearer back in the day who was working with those guys, and they were kind of friends of mine. But I was more just friends with him socially, him and his wife, and we would hang out and not just talk about music. And you know, when the Scott Sheets John Scott thing fell apart, and I was going back to the piano and writing songs, you know, I'd send him songs, and he'd come play bass for me in the studio. But yeah, it's a great memory, and boy, what a career that guy has had. I mean, as you mentioned, icon.
That, and then he also found success as a computer animator, a path away from what he's kind of known for. And I relate that to you with the public speaking and also the creating TV shows. Did you back then in the 80s say, I also want to do other stuff?
You know, I always had fantasies of writing a musical. I kind of grew up on musical theater. My songs kind of have that kind of storytelling thing. My mom was a piano teacher, and when LA Unified cut funding, she went into the schools and just started doing musicals. So I was Tony in West Side Story. So I always kind of had this fantasy of scoring, writing for film and musicals. But of course, when you're fortunate enough to actually have a career in the music business, you know, you have zero time. You're on the road, you're touring, you're writing, you're recording, you're promoting, and then you have a family and the rest of it. Right. So really towards once it kind of my radio career ended, I actually started focusing on some of that stuff. I actually spent a year working on a musical. Didn't happen, but it was a cool experience. I'm actually still developing some there. So yeah, I think I always kind of thought about doing it, but never had the bandwidth. Also, we have a family business that I work at that has nothing to do with the music business, that especially during the pandemic really took all my time. So I think only in the last probably 6-7 years have I been able to devote energy to building out the keynotes, television, and hopefully do some musical theater stuff as well.
Did you ever talk keynotes with Brian Vander Ark from the Verve Pipe?
Well, I'll talk to him about an hour because we're on tour together. Yeah, he when we connected for this tour, he'd heard that I was doing these keynotes, and I heard about his kind of one hit, you know, how you deal with being a one who, which I just thought was brilliant. The beauty and the curse of that, and how it can go both ways. I mean, 99.9999999% of aspiring musicians would love to be a one-hit wonder. God knows I would. And certainly he's had other songs that have been popular, just not, you know, when you have a massive song like The Freshman, it's very hard to match that. So, but his attitude's great. And yeah, might tend to be more kind of business, creativity, analytical, because I have this other side of my life where I run a business, 300 employees, deal with things that most businesses do. And then I have a philanthropy side that I do a lot with, that I can speak to when I speak to kind of those kind of groups. And it's fun. It keeps things different. You know, it's great to play, you know, Superman every night, 100 Years, The Riddle. But you know, when you do it the 10,000th time, sometimes it's cool to have a talk or something that you're learning about when you do it. And that's what the keynotes do. I meet great organizations, and I've become very good friends with a lot of the folks I speak to in those companies who, frankly, some of them are supporting this Ukraine song and our mission to grow it. So it's cool. You know, it keeps things different and fresh.
Most people I interview, it's kind of a struggle of things to find to talk about because they have the new album, they've got the upcoming tour, and that's all. And then the family business, that's yet another thing that I think the average person may not know that is successful for you, but is more successful arguably than everything else. So it's, I guess the bigger question is how you manage to get all of this done. Are you a big to-do list or calendar kind of person or delegator?
I sure have been in the last 3 or 4 years. My father is 83 years old. So of course, when the pandemic hit, he had to quarantine. So I really got thrust into running all aspects of the business. And I found very quickly that, yes, I have lists. Whenever I have a thought, I email it to myself because it'll be out of my brain in 10 seconds. And also I've had to hire some folks. I actually had a talk with my dad a year ago. Funny, when the pandemic was kind of coming to a close about, look, I'm not done with music. I'm not going to make records. I'm not going to chase singles, but I think I have a role to play in the culture because I have a different worldview. I saw how Superman moved the needle. I want to at least try to have a voice in the culture, but to do that, we have to bring in some people to help, a layer of management to take some pressure off me. And so for the first time in our company's history, we did. I found an amazing GM who I talk to every morning, who I'll, you know, be emailing after you, but he's taken a lot of the day-to-day off my plate. And so I can devote, instead of 90-10 business to music, I can be like 70-30 music to business. And that's why the last year, frankly, has been, you know, kind of so productive for me musically.
Well, down to the last 2 questions here before I let you go and you talk to Brian Vander Ark about his one-hit wonder sermon. Do I remember it correctly? This is the first question, that you were on the 9/11 concert at Madison Square Garden doing Superman and the related the compilation. There's a reason I asked that.
Oh yeah, no, it was surreal. You know, Superman had just become a hit song around the world when 9/11 occurred, obviously becoming one of the songs to recognize the firefighters in New York. I didn't realize I was in London when 9/11 happened. So I didn't realize I got back. And then I got the call to do the concert for New York for my buddy Rick Krim, who ran VH1.
Yes, he did. I used to work at Viacom, and you weren't nice to Rick one time. You may not. You didn't get played on VH1.
Well, you know, he was actually one of the few 5 people that when he worked at EMI Publishing that was a fan of mine. And and I said, Rick, are you sure? It's like, I saw the list. It's every living icon. You want me there? He's like, your song is the song. So yeah, so playing that concert for New York, certainly the most significant thing I've ever done. Maybe the close second is my visit to Ukraine I just did. But yeah, it was, you know, over 20 years later, it's hard to put into words.
Well, related to that concert, were you one of the people that came on stage when Paul McCartney said, everybody, we're doing Freedom again? Did you have to do Freedom that night?
Here's a good story. So we were backstage. It's the end. Okay.
Yeah.
We're behind the curtain and everybody's there and they're all about to go sing, you know, with McCartney. And I knew I couldn't go up to everybody. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to 3. I'm going to go up to 3. So I walked, first one was Townsend. Mr. Townsend, you don't know me, big fan. Tommy's been in blah, blah, blah. Thank you. Roy, next one, Clapton. Mr. Clapton, you know, thank you. It's like, he was very kind. Then, of course, Billy Joel. Billy Joel, you know, Glass Houses, my first concert, seen him 20 times. Him and Elton are why we're talking.
Yeah.
Mr. Joel, thank you. I saw you in, you know, the Fabulous Forum in the mid-'80s, and because of you, I'm doing this stuff. And you know, Billy was a little. That
was a between period for him, to put it very nicely.
Yeah, and he wasn't rude, but he's like, oh, I remember that gig, you know, Liberty DeVito missed a note or something. And I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. So then Paul calls people to go up, and I go, I can't go. I'm not you guys. And John Bon Jovi comes up to me and he's like, dude, I wish I wrote that song that you sang. You're coming. He literally grabs me. Melissa Etheridge pushes me, and they pull me on stage. And there I am standing between everybody at the piano with Paul McCartney. Again, if it was any other situation, you know, a dream. But to his credit, you know, McCartney did that. And we're actually, you know, I'm kind of taking that will and calling for a concert for Ukraine. I'm calling for a Live Aid for Ukraine. We need one. Paul, you know, McCartney, that was his will, provided incredible solace for our country. But yeah, boy, how
Yeah, that was one of the biggest concerts ever, and it got the Sony Live release. And
yeah,
we got the really out of place Jimmy Fallon medley, and Backstreet Boys put Playing Games with My Heart on there, which is why I never forgot that album. You have the greatest songs ever that are like tragic or you know, about, you know, recovering, and then you hear that Backstreet. Anyway, my words, not yours.
it was chaos. I mean, it was live. The microphones weren't working. I had white noise in my ears when I sang Superman. I didn't hear a thing. But, you know, it wasn't about us. It was about those 20,000 people who'd been down at Ground Zero. It was about the families we met. I expected to be in the first hour with all the kind of young kids. They put me at the end. I'm like, what are you guys doing? I almost had a heart attack. But yeah, you know, The Who was my trailer next to me. I'm like, this is what planet am I on? But it was great, and I think it's another example how music can rise above what we typically talk about. You know, fame, fortune, charts, you know, tickets. But every once in a while, it transcends, and certainly it did that night.
And totally get that. And the last question, this might be the quickest no I've ever gotten. With all the, you know, sniffing around town in LA in the late 80s, early 90s, was there ever an opportunity to audition for David Lee Roth's band because Brett Tuggle wasn't going to be around?
I don't know. I'd probably have to work on my karate kicks. Yeah. No, I didn't. I didn't do much auditioning. I was kind of the guy in the room writing the songs. You know, I'd play at the 8129 or whatever that was, at the bottom of the Coconut Teaser. There was that little room there where four people were, and I'd go play there. And when everybody was out on Gazzari's, you know, it's Saturday night, or at the Rainbow, you know, I was in my dorm trying to write my, you know, 200th song that year, and trying to improve as a writer. And I think that's always been my thing. You know, fight for fighting. People know the songs. John, they don't know the guy. I think that reflects my thing. It's always been about trying to write the best songs I can, and that's still my attitude. And but boy, it would have been fun to be on the road with David Lee Roth. I'm sure I'd have some good stories. Rudy would have to, like, you know, prepare me for that.
I can imagine. Well, thank you for the many years of great music. Thank you for your time. Looking forward to seeing you live in New York in the very near future, John.
Thanks so much, Darren. Pleasure.
Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the day, man. Take care,
everybody.
Paltrocast.